Ini nih saya sudah berada di dalam Colosseum. Bisa tiket, saya ikut grup, bayar 30 euro per person. Kita nih lagi nerangin karya
was known as Nero's Colossus, which is a word of Greek origin meaning in those times any gigantic statue. A few decades after Nero's reign, another Roman emperor, Hadrian, decided to build a big temple on the top of that same hill. To make space for that temple, he had to move the statue first. So, 24 elephants, 12 couples of elephants from India, dragged the gigantic statue from up the hill down to the valley, to a place which is just a few steps from the place where we first met outside the Colosseum. From that moment on, the statue stood there in its new position for long enough to give this building its modern name. Because in the following centuries, the centuries we usually call the early Middle Ages, the people of Rome started to nickname the monument that stood next to the Colossus, the Colosseum or Colosseo in Italian. With a layer of sand on top. The shows took place on that sand. That's where the word arena came from, as arena originally meant just sand in Latin. A few years ago, a small part of the stage was rebuilt. Most of it is over there on games coming from North Africa, the Middle East, Central and Eastern Europe, and many of those animals were slaughtered at the end of the shows. The killings of animals were also seen as sacrifices, as the Colosseum was actually consecrated to the gods. So along with the building for shows, this was also some sort of huge pagan temple. During the central part of the day, sometimes death sentences were executed in here. And most of those executions also involved animals. Convicted criminals were sent onto that stage unarmed and usually half naked and bound, and fed to the most ferocious animals, typically lions, tigers, wolves, or bears. Even dogs were used sometimes to make the shows slower. That type of death penalty was known as damnatio ad bestias, that is, to be condemned to the beasts. And finally, in the afternoon, there were usually the most popular shows, that is, the gladiator combats. The best gladiators sometimes became celebrities in ancient Rome. Most of them, though, were convicted criminals, prisoners of war, fugitive slaves. Just a few were free men who chose that dangerous career. All of them were, of course, highly skilled professionals, but at the same time, many of them were forced into that career, and just a few managed to buy their freedom through the big prizes they received in case of victory. But for some of them, the combats were rather just some sort of delayed death penalty, a way of being used for entertainment purposes before being eventually killed. Gladiators rarely rode horses or chariots. Most combats involved just foot soldiers, and they usually fought in pairs, gladiator versus gladiator, with many pairs of gladiators fighting at the same time on that big stage. Each pair had its own referee, although it wasn't really a referee because the gladiator combats basically had no rules. So in this case, the referee's main job was just to decide when the fight was over, when it was time to call for the emperor's attention. Gladiators wore usually just some kind of underwear, some sort of loincloth, and helmets of many different shapes to protect their heads. And of course they used weapons, a knife or a spear or a trident. The most ancient weapon, though, was a rather short sword with a very thick blade, which was originally used by the Roman army. This was known as gladius in Latin, and that's where the word gladiator came from. The Latin word is spelled just like in English, gladiator. And some scholars calculated that about 1 out of 4 or even 1 out of 3 combats ended in the loser's statue. Must have been one of the statues that decorated all the outer arches on the 2 middle floors of the Colosseum. That means originally 80 plus 80 arches, so 160 marble statues now almost completely lost. During the Middle Ages, after the Colosseum was abandoned, in a minute I will tell you when that happened, many of the statues were probably made into pieces by the people of Rome and then turned either into new decorations or, in the worst cases, into mortar to build palaces and churches of medieval Rome. The main gladiator training school, though, was precisely on the opposite side, just outside the Colosseum on the east. It was known as Ludus Magnus, the big school or the main school in Latin. It was more or less where you now see the facade of those pink buildings just outside the Colosseum. Shortly before their combats, gladiators would get out of that school riding chariots and wearing armors and purple cloaks, just like victorious generals did in those times. And then they would have a parade all around the building on the square to enter through that gate, the west gate. Then they would walk through this corridor where we are.
Masih di Colosseo, grup yang kedua setelah 1 jam pause. Ini nih di belakang saya nih masih ada bangunan yang sudah tua zaman Romawi. Di seberang jalan sana ada gedung Colosseo untuk para gladiator. Ini Maya nih sedang menjelaskan cerita zaman Romawi. Tadi antri 10 menit lah antri di sini nih mau masuk biarpun sama grup.